Welcome to The Tripod, the official podcast of San Clemente High School. I'm your host, Jay Bish. In the spring of 2013, when Sean Topping was a sophomore in my English class, he taught me one of the most important lessons I've ever learned as a teacher. We'll cover that and more on this episode of The Tripod. Well, I got to hit you with this because it's been 8 years since I had you in class, and
I know.
you need to know this thing because this comes up every year with my students. So when I came in to student teach, I had my eyes like wide open, ears peeled back. I was just trying to learn everything as fast as I could to be good enough.
Yep.
And I think the biggest lesson that I took away from that semester was through you. In terms of, because I remember you got to see that semester, and I was sitting there the whole time just being like, this dude is great in discussions. He's like awesome in the classroom, doesn't do his homework and whatever else. But I learned like the importance, because I have a lot of kids that will be kind of stymied with the fact that like they get bad grades in my class by treating the same as anybody else, whatever. And so I think it's helped me so much in my career, just having that semester with you guys, because I learned basically like not to base anything off of grades, you know? Which is weird because like I never was a good student anyways, but I always felt like teachers were like tighter with or cared more about kids that got good grades and did their homework, whatever else, you know? And so I think to be on the other side of that and then see this kid come in and, you know, be the way you were, that has been like a sustained lesson. It's been so cool for me to just continue to utilize. So do you remember anything about like the kind of kid that you were when you were a sophomore?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, dude, I'm flattered. That means a lot. I I think from like a super early age, I just like kind of understood like the value of relationships more than anything. Fortunate to, again, like I think I mentioned this to you before, but had a lot of people in my life who, you know, made my scenario a lot easier, helped like create pathways that I didn't find, you know, on my own at an early age. So I think kind of sophomore year, you know, I just switched up friends groups, kind of just figured out like kind of the people that I wanted to be around, those who were more focused on getting to college. And while I probably wasn't like the most, you know, homework driven, I wasn't like good at like take home assignments just because like I was always super busy after class. I just really kind of valued like making relationships with my teachers and professors and like showing my engagement in class. And I think that as I progressed through high school, that was something that, you know, I developed further on. It's like, okay, like, yeah, you could check this box, be a participant, excuse me, engage in class discussions, you know, be there, do well on tests. But at the end of the day, like you have to check every box. So that's something where it's like, I totally understand that, you know, for a lot of people, school doesn't come naturally in a sense. You're not like school oriented, or that's not like something that you're going to be good at. But I think there are just certain boxes that you have to like mentally process. Hey, like to get from here to there, I'm going to have to do these things. So let's do it. Like, let's put our head down. Let's grind through it. And I think that was like kind of the developmental year going back to sophomore year was like things were starting to click, you know, hanging around a really good crew who was all pretty motivated on going to college. It just kind of fell into place, fortunately.
Because yeah, you went from that year, and then I remember I saw you in the quad like your senior year, and I'm thinking, oh, cool, I'll get Sean as a senior. And you were like, oh, I'm taking AP Lit, and I was like, what? So what was it the friend group that kind of led you in that direction? Was it like some personal stuff? Like, what do you think? Because it seems like you got a wake up call at some point.
Yeah,
that propelled you, you know, to now where you are.
for sure. So like I mentioned to you before, I came from like a single mom. Obviously my stepdad came in the picture a little bit later on, wonderful guy, but not a traditional background in like, you know, curricular education. So as my mom like motivated me to do well in school, it wasn't like, you know, the typical San Clemente mom where it's like, okay, you need to get into this class. Once you have these grades, you're going to be able to get into this like X state university. You know, like I feel like a lot of people in San Clemente specifically, like fortunately have great backgrounds to where things are pretty, that, you know, like there's a rubric to succeed.
Right.
And that was something that I kind of just had to learn on my own because my mom wasn't going to push me into AP classes. Super supportive, but that just wasn't her prerogative.
Mhm.
So I think sophomore year, I like saw, a lot of good friends that I had, they're like all going AP. I'm like, why are you guys doing that? It's like, well, I mean, you're not going to get into any California state school, sadly, unless you're probably above a 4.8. I assume now it's like 5.0 or above.
Yeah.
So that was just kind of like, it just flipped a switch. It's like, okay, this is something that I need to do to get to end goal. And I kind of think that I, obviously coming from, not like more modest background, my whole thing was like, I really want to be successful and kind of provide for my family, take my kids to club sports, get them to like whatever they want to do, obviously. So that was kind of just like the switching moments. Like, this is what I want. These are the things I need to do to check that off.
Was it difficult at all for you to have like a non-traditional background, like in terms of with friend groups and stuff, like with fitting in? Like you tend to hear about certain kids' stories and they just say like, oh, it was hard for me to like find a friend group because my lifestyle was just different than everybody else's.
Sure.
Did that play into anything for you, or were you able to overcome that with your communication skills and just, who you are as a person?
Yeah, dude, good question. My mom was like phenomenal at kind of like hiding a lot of the stuff. My dad was like, he passed away a couple months ago, but he just kind of was in like, he had a rougher background, Vietnam veteran, kind of involved with like a lot of drug type stuff. So like that was kind of shooed away from me at a young age. So my mom just kind of like put this like veil in front of me of like, okay, everything's fine. Like, you'll be okay. But there wasn't a lot of like guidance there. She was just kind of trying to make sure that I thought that everything was okay. Which I mean, it was, but it didn't like make me feel different in a sense, is what I'm trying to say. Like, she definitely like went all out of her way to make sure that I could go to a good elementary school, hang out with the right people. And then fortunately, pretty outgoing person. So it wasn't too difficult to just kind of like find friend groups in different places. But it is definitely something that I like consider and I think back on. I'm like, I'm so thankful that coming from, the background that I did, how it ended up to where it is today,
That's awesome, dude. Walk me through, because I love what you were telling me earlier, when we talked and we're messaging back and forth about your decision to go to TCU versus like you were looking at USC and stuff as well. What played into that in terms of going out there versus staying local?
Yeah, definitely. I remember when I didn't get into USC. So that was kind of the big factor there. I was like, I believe it was like deferred and I could do the Trojan transfer plan. I just thought that the college experience, the 4-year experience was something that I really wanted. And especially being from Orange County, I mean, it is a bubble in a sense. Like, you're not really going to experience much if you stay pretty local for that long.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of decided, I'm like, what? I've really like established great connections and foundations here. And like, those are still so strong today. Like, I'm still best friends with all the kids that I was in high school, still really close with all their families. I just was like, why not try to build a network elsewhere, expand like my family and friends. Fortunately went to Texas, and TCU at the time, like one of the reasons why I went there, obviously they gave great scholarship and they were one ahead of the USC undergraduate business school. So I'm like, all right, let's go there. Football, we were projected 2 in the nation at the time. It was like right after we were just, borderline getting into the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of all rolled together. Things worked out. Fortunately, had like a friend's family in California. Their grandmother like pulled me aside and was like, hey, like if you need help going to that university, like, I want to offer what I can. And she really made it possible. And I'm like forever indebted to her. Like, not many people know that, but it was really what made me able to go to that school.
That's crazy. But also it goes back to who you are, like that person's not going to go and reach out to you if you're the antithesis of the guy that you actually are, so that's really neat.
I think also like, it's not like necessary. It's not like you don't ask for something. I mean, and that's not what I'm saying, but like, if you want something really badly and you are like trying to make it happen, like people see that and they want to help you, mm-hmm. If you're like eager, willing to learn, people want to help those people. So
that's cool. That's cool. I mean, obviously I can tell that the 4-year experience was awesome for you. It's been kind of like an interesting shift in high school and stuff. And we kind of talk now about like other means of getting to where you want to go versus the 4-year.
Sure.
If you had someone that came up to you and was like, like I'm on the fence here. I don't know if I want to go to like a trade school or like go to the 4-year. Like, what would you tell them in terms of like why the 4-year works for you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it just depends, right? Like at this point, I think a bachelor's degree is just, that's the prerequisite to getting any sort of like corporate job.
Mhm.
Obviously I kind of went down that route, but if you don't want to do that, I mean, and obviously there are ways around that. It just takes a lot more effort. Like they won't consider people in most corporate sales positions unless you have that bachelor's.
Gotcha.
But I mean, if that's not your passion, like if you want to be in the sky and you want to be a pilot, like I don't recommend that you go to a 4-year,
Yeah.
And I think that's like something really valuable in high school is like to start having those conversations at a young age, just to like at least theorize a plan, get something in the works to help make that whole process easier. Like for example, for me, sophomore year was like, okay, I want to go to college. I want to do this so I can end up here. And it was like defining what that looks like. So I think for anyone, like if you have an idea of what you want to do and like where you want to go, start having those discussions, talk to someone who's done it. That was like my huge, like really big thing in high school is like, you can ask anyone who I graduated with, like I probably talked to their parent at some point. Cause like, I just like to get different perspectives. Oh dude, I would set up dates with like all my friends' parents and just like be like, hey, like want to know what you guys do, like how you do it. And I think that at the end of the day, it's like what helped me build relationships is because like showing interest in someone like is always going to make them like you,
Right.
and want to, give you their experience. And then in turn, you can kind of emulate that, the things that you like, the things that you didn't like, and grow at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, you're obviously like wise beyond your years and such. Like, where does that idea come from in high school going, I'm going to go talk to my parents' friends about like all this stuff? Like how did that manifest in your head of like, okay, I'm just going to go and do this? Cause I know I feel like I was an older soul because of what I had to deal with when I was younger and stuff, but I never would have wanted to do that. And so it's impressive to hear that. Like, where did that come from? That idea come from?
Yeah. I don't know. I think I just enjoy talking to people. And I think that parents are someone who like always like super engaged. Like if you're willing to put time in with like a friend's family or someone who is older than you, any sort of person with, years under their belt of experience in anything, parenting, chef, anything like that. Obviously those two are not very related, but they want to share, like they want to talk about their past. And then in turn, like they're going to give you their time and like want to hear about you. And then it's always good to be asked about yourself because it makes you feel like what you're doing is worthwhile,
For sure, dude.
I don't know why I started doing it, but I always did it. And
I think that's just what's so cool. Like you see so many kids that are just like in a tunnel forever, and then they become 25 and they wake up and they go, man, like I know nothing, and then you have these kids, like I said, someone like you who's grown into a person where this all makes sense, because you're kind of planning ahead and looking at your friends and their families and going, I want to do these things, whatever. I think it's just what's so impressive about it is you took that time to sit down and have them talk to you, and you were willing to sit. I mean, a lot of kids like will not sit on the couch with a friend's parents and listen. They'll sit there and kind of be thinking about other things or whatever else. But I mean, to be cognizant of what you can learn from your elders is so cool that you hit on that at such a young age. So
I think kind of like one of the changing moments is it's always funny, like as you get older and every time I go home, I like have conversations with my family, my mom, and it's like, you realize that they're just humans. Like parents, like when you're young, it's like this crazy stigma that they know everything. And that's not the case. So I think at an earlier age, I was like able to decipher like, okay, yeah, my mom is brilliant, knows so many things, but like this group of people might know something, that group of people, and almost like being willing just to like be a sponge at that point was really, I think, what kind of like, I don't know, drove me in my career, making connections, kind of put me to where I am today.
That's cool, dude. Yeah, Socrates has this quote where he talks about the fact that the people that think they know everything are the dumbest essentially, and
Yeah.
people that think they know nothing are the most intelligent, because they're looking for those answers, and they're like, always hungry for knowledge and whatever else. So that's cool, man. Speaking of philosophy, I want to get into this whole like kind of thinking world and stuff like that you've been adapting and getting into. How did you come across and find that thirst for philosophy initially? Where did that come in, at TCU, or was that earlier?
No, not at all. It happened like COVID. I kind of just like a little background, like some things happened to me like during COVID, and like some decisions that I'd made in my life were not like the smartest. And it was like the one time in my life where I had always like been super confident in what I was doing, and like that was right. And I like did some things. I'm like, wow, like I've ended up like putting myself in a really horrible situation that I'm not happy with. Like I hurt people around me. And it was like, okay, like maybe I need to start like considering, I don't know, like looking elsewhere. Obviously, like I've kind of always had like my own philosophy and own foundation of like how stuff needs to happen, almost to a fault, like having confidence in what that I was doing is right, like is almost, selfish in a sense. So taking a moment, like I kind of started with it with just one of my coworkers, like, hey, have you ever heard of like stoicism? Looked into that. I don't know if you know who Ryan Holiday is.
I know about him because I looked him up after you wrote me about him. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the man. He loves like Mark, like his probably number one person that he talks about is like Marcus Aurelius. But like he quotes all of them, all the great Stoics, all the great philosophers. And it was just kind of position where I was like, okay, like this is a great motto to live by. There was like a daily Stoic book where I would like write down, hey, here's what I want to accomplish today. This is what I'm good at. This is what I need to work on. This is my plan. And then read from that book. I would like take a few takeaways. How can I take that in my life? Like, for example, one of them was just like trying to think like, oh, don't like someone who sits on something that, or like frets about something that they can't control is just wasting time. So like, I literally would put that in a scenario. I'm like, okay, what am I thinking about right now that is wasting my time? Like, there's nothing I can do about it. And then try to, emulate that onto my life in a sense. So that kind of got me into it. And then I just like was watching like a bunch of videos on it. And they're like, okay, well, you should probably like start from the beginning. So that's where like you go back, you need to go through, like Plato's Republic, kind of go through the whole works. I've been so awful at it recently. I will admit I haven't been reading as much because Plato's Republic was just pretty brutal. It is a tough read.
Yeah.
So like I need to find some summaries on that to really like grasp what he's talking about.
Yeah.
But as you get like later on, like some of those other guys are really fun and interesting reads. But yeah, I would say like kind of how it started though was just like creating structure to get back on sorry. To get back on like schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't sleeping well, and I like needed to figure out like a routine to put me in the right mind. And that kind of just like led my hand. And then like, as I mentioned, like father had passed away, and there was just like so many things that I was like holding on to in a sense that I was like, I need to like let go of all this. Like the world in my life is like finite. It's not going to stop moving if I just sit there and like sulk on it. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what philosophy is about, right? It's like deciding what's right, what's wrong, how you should, find virtue and live your life accordingly.
So where do when you spent about I'm guessing it's been what, like about a year plus since you kind of delved into that, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
What impact have you seen as that comes across your life? What changes have you made? Like, what are some big things that you've noticed in yourself that have been different in general?
Dude, here's like a really simple, small one. When I'm driving, like I'm just kind of an aggro driver. Like you always think like me, like I need to get there. Literally sitting in the car, like I always try to think to myself, I'm like, what would like a Stoic think about my actions right now? So I'm always like, sit there and like when you want to go do something or you want to speed by someone, I try to think like, okay, is this like extra 30 seconds really going to change my life? Like, is this in my control? And it's like made driving such a more pleasant experience. Well, I still go, get places quickly. I just don't get as fretted about it, and like a little bit more thoughtful in how I do that.
So whereas you might have driven faster to make something on time, like, are you okay with being like not on time sometimes? Like, do you know, like how does that enter in, especially in what you do for a living?
Sure. Punctuality is like really huge. You obviously got to accommodate for, I mean, we don't really drive anymore, but not in the sense like that I'm always on time to places.
Yeah.
It's more so just like the journey of getting there, not like getting upset about certain drivers. I mean, it's a work in progress, I'll say, like,
Yeah.
not in my nearest dreams, like, am I actually like sitting there patiently behind someone?
Yeah.
But I'm at least having those internal discussions. And I hope at some point I'm like, we're here. That's it.
Yeah. That's because I mean, one of my bandmates in high school, he was always tardy to school. And one day he came to school and he goes, you know what? I was sitting in the light and I was just like, all right, I'm gonna be late. And just, it is what it is. And I remember sitting there and just like taking that in, going, you're late to a thing. Like, yes, you don't want to be late to everything, whatever else. But it's like at the same time, in the grand scope of things, like how do you weigh that? And so it's always been a thing to me. Like, I love that you have those inner monologues with yourself about, you know, like certain decisions you're making or like mindsets that you're in, because really it's like when you take a step back from everything and you look at, you know, stuff through a wide lens, it's crazy how like what you can like extrapolate from your life to make your life just that much easier, more fulfilling, versus, like you said, honking at somebody, speeding around somebody, whatever, just to get one car length ahead and have nothing really change, except for the fact that you're fulminating now and whatever else, you know? So I think that's such a neat thing that you're picking away at, because again, you can't change, you know, your core being overnight, but at the same time, to be chipping away at that stuff and be cognizant, it's just like, dude, that's huge.
I mean, self-realization is like, I would say, the biggest takeaway. It's like, I literally question myself. I'm like, did I ever like really think about my existence like prior to, I would say, like college, you know, like going through high school, like things are just happening around you. And obviously like you can have a plan, but I think like reading some of that stuff and like people like literally have internal discussions about like what they should do in this, like what they shouldn't do, how to react. And it's like, wow, like I just kind of was completely reactive for so long. So not like in a bad way in a sense,
But you're as a kid, you know, it's like,
completely.
dude, there was like someone that I knew the other couple of years ago, whatever, and they were like, they work at like a different school, like whatever, and they were like, oh, hey, I had this class, and like, it was like a senior class, whatever, and they were like, yeah, it's a senior class, and like, and it's terrible, and I was like, what's wrong with it? And they were like, oh, I've got this type of kid and this type of kid, and I was like, so you have a typical class of 18-year-olds, you know, like, and it's funny because I'll have kids that come up to me like around town and stuff, and I'll be like, dude, I'm so sorry about, like, I was so mature, and I'm like, no, you were a high school kid. Like, we're not here to judge that kind of stuff, you know, or we shouldn't be, at least. And so I think at the same time, it's like you're having this like awakening at the perfect time in your life, you know, like where you've had these reactive times, like you mentioned before, like you've made decisions that in the past that like weren't your favorite things you decided upon, you know. And so like you have two choices. You either carry on or you reflect. And obviously the reflection has led you to this really cool place of now trying to just realize sort of what's going to happen down the road. And dude, you're off to just an awesome start with that. That's like, it's cool to hear you talk about that kind of stuff, because like I said, I mean, you look at, like, I remember Miss Mariani and I were like talking about you when I was student teaching, and just kind of being like, man, like Sean is like, in class, he's so smart and he just won't do X, Y, and Z, whatever. And so only because we were like, this kid is like so full of so much cool stuff, that I think when you get a chance to touch base with people down the road after they've had a chance to grow up and grow to themselves, this is the kind of stuff that excites people like me and people like teachers, you know, because we just hope that this is the thing that happens. And so, I mean, dude, yeah, to be reactive is to be youthful. And you know, now as you're coming of age, as an older guy and so on and so forth, like in your what, like mid-20s, early 20s?
Just turned 25. I'm feeling old.
Oh, dude,
but it's awesome. Like, it's delightful. I'm like, I welcome this year like a lot, just because like I'm not, you know, you can't get away with some of the stuff that you used to be able to.
Right.
Not that like my life has completely changed around, but it's almost like comforting in a sense. It's like, you know, I'm a contributing human to society now.
Yeah.
You know, I pay taxes. Like I have opinions. I believe things. And while like I don't like to push those on anyone. At least like, you kind of dig your roots into the ground a little bit.
Right.
Which I think is awesome about growing up.
How have you, like, what have you, because I know you're buddies with some guys you were in high school with and stuff too. Like, do you notice how all of you have kind of undertaken changes like this? And like, how does that work in terms of coexistence with your friend groups?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say like my high school group is super varied, which is awesome because I mean, like every one of the kids that I graduated with, like we're all doing pretty well. Everyone's pretty happy in their career. All live in the same area. Like we live a pretty simple standard life. I mean, like that's one of the things like why I just figured it'd be a good idea to move to New York because I just want to switch things up, like get a different perspective. Also, like that city's so crazy, like you can't live there for very long. So I just got to get it under my belt for like a year or two.
Yeah. What do you, I mean, oh, sorry, go for it.
No, please.
What do you, I mean, like, what do you hope to experience, or what hurdles do you hope to run into there that can help? Because as you know, obviously you're someone that's looking at, okay, I'm going to live for a lot of years. I want to get the most out of these years. Like what, as you go into a place, like I'm going to New York, like, what do you want out of it?
I haven't really answered that question yet. I think I'm just open to like something new.
Yeah.
I've experienced Dallas and like as much as I loved it, I just don't know if it's like where I think I'm meant to be. And it's kind of just like exploratory, it's like finding yourself more. Obviously I learned a lot here and then maybe going over there, I'll learn something else. I think that there's such like a collection of different kinds of people, like really smart people, that it will be like an interesting way to, switch up the groove a little bit.
That's awesome.
And I think just being young and going out there, enjoying myself, making new friends, trying to be as successful as possible. Obviously it's it's bustling out there. So just like kind of, well, I was hoping like, I think kind of at the end of the day, like one of the things I wanted to do was obviously working in there with a talented crew around me, kind of like kick it into high gear, like really kind of grind it out for a little. And then from that point, kind of let my decisions, or not my decisions necessarily, but influences around me help guide me to like the next stage.
That's awesome, dude. I want to end with this thing that I love that have gotten into. And I think, the mental health stuff is obviously a big, big deal that everyone's been talking about too. But what drew you to like meditation? I know you're doing like cooking and stuff too and all that. Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, so I had like I would say senior year, I just like went through this period. Something had happened in like my friend group where like it just kind of was a shock to us all. Like someone took their life and it was like really a scenario. I was like, whoa. Like, and that's, I think if I look back at like the self-realization, I think that was the moment. It's like, whoa, people like think about those things. Not that like that discussion wasn't out there before, but it makes it real when it's like someone that you knew and you had just like conversation. Not that it was like my best friend, but it was a scenario. I was like, holy crap, like that's real. That's crazy. And I'm like studying for finals. And then like, I literally was incapable of sitting down. And I like realized, I'm like, wait, why am I feeling like this? And like, I was like, oh shoot, like I'm having anxiety. This is a thing. So finish up that finals, go home. I don't know if you know like Tristan Morgan at all.
I don't think so.
He has like an awesome background if you ever have the chance to meet with him. But I knew that he had gone through something similar. And I'm like, dude, like, and a few others as well. I'm like, dude, I don't know what's going on. Like, I feel like I have lost control of my life. He's like, dude, you're fine. Like, you're you. You know who you are. You're just going through something right now. Like, here are a few tools in your toolkit. Like, let's walk through it. Like, spent a bunch of time like helping me out. Like, literally one winter break. Started like going on runs on the trail. After my run, I'd sit down and like meditate for 20 minutes and like I'd walk out of there like feeling like the man. I'm like, this is awesome. I just completely like was able to process myself through like a really unfortunate scenario. Just like kind of like like it helped me. It was like a positive feedback mechanism, where like I found grounding, I found like peace. I found like clarity from doing that. And I've been like really awful at it recently, like things are just picking up, but it's always like a foundation that I know I can always go back to in this scenario that, things kind of get a little out of hand again. And not that that happens often, but it's such an awesome tool to, find a little bit of solace in yourself. Like even just like, and obviously like it's kind of hard to do. And like, it's kind of like, it's up to everyone's own interpretation. Even if like you feel like you're mentally like having conversations in there while you close your eyes, but like at least you're like sitting down and taking the time to acknowledge that. And then it just gets easier.
That's what I was gonna. I mean, I love you also brought up the fact that it's hard to do it at times because obviously you're in the middle of a grind. It's gonna pick up when you get out there to New York. Like, I mean, do you have any? And I know it's a thing too because I was in the same boat. I had anxiety, I had all kind of stuff too. Still do, but like, I mean, like when you're in the midst of this grind, how do you find that time to get to it versus, oh, I'll just do it once every month and whatever? Because I think we both know that it takes more than just kind of a one-off. Like,
Yeah.
any ideas on how you intend to keep that a part of your life despite all the craziness?
Yeah. Structure is super helpful. And it's super hard to like implement at like a really young age, especially like when you're in high school or college. But it is game changing. There's a reason why like all those super successful execs are like, I have this morning routine. There's a method behind it. I don't have like the flexibility really to do it as extensive as I would like to, just because I'm waiting to move to New York. A lot of different things are changing. But once I kind of get settled, like I love waking up in the morning, reading for like 20 to 30 minutes, spending 15 minutes to like literally meditate right after that, while like you're clear. I also do like, I like to like dedicate a few minutes, literally just like go outside and like look at the UV lights, just because I listen to Andrew Walker, who talks about like how important it is to like set your circadian rhythm. Mm-hmm. Just like a few different things to like build your morning routine. And like once you have those in your day, like, which is almost to a sense is not good, but like you don't feel like you can function to your full capability unless you get those in. That's benefit awesome. Of that though is like you make exception, like you'll work around, you'll make sure that you dedicate the time to do that, whether it's waking up a little bit earlier to do it, just finding that structure in the day.
That's awesome, dude. Last thing I want to hit you with. Do you have like a vision in your head of where you're going, or are you trying to sort of build that image as you go?
Yeah, it's like always like an iterative process. I mean, it changes like every month. And I think that was something that over 2020 was like so shattering. It's because like, again, like I've mentioned, like even always since I was young, like I had that plan. Mm-hmm. And I'm almost going to contradict myself in the sense that like, once that plan kind of crumbles, you kind of can lose yourself in a sense. And that's where like, I've learned so much about like, obviously like have an ideal vision, but it doesn't need to abide by, this exact structure. So like this vision that I had happening just kind of fell apart for a second. And that's like where you really like have to consider like, okay, now what? And I've learned at the end of the day that I don't want to plan too much. I just know like I have an idea of where I would like to be. And I think at the end of it, it's finding myself, in more of a managerial position, like where I can empower those underneath me. Obviously want to do like some sort of volunteership, whether that be like engaged in, I've always like really like Big Brother program, because I think like really having like a direct impact on someone's life via, coaching, being a friend, I think is really huge. So I think that's going to be my future. And then I obviously like this next year, like put down a fiscal goal of like saving up X amount of dollars so I can put it for a down payment for a house.
That's awesome.
So that's like 5 year. I don't know what 10 year looks like. I don't know what 20, but that's kind of like 5 year.
I think that's smart though. I mean, to do the 5 year thing versus people that have these crazy goals for 10 years down the road when they have no idea what's going to happen even in the next year.
I mean, look at what just happened this last year.
Right.
It's hard to do that. It's really like, it's almost dangerous to set that, because then you don't achieve it. And it's like, oh shoot, like now what?
For more episodes of The Tripod, check out sctripod.com.